This demo is on printing Intaglio prints, which is quite different than relief prints. We're still using the same ink. You do need an ink knife. You still want to tape down some disposable palette, which I got in the bookshelf at the back of the class. It's kind of messy, so you may want some gloves. Then we're going to be using what's called a tarlatan. It's essentially like a piece of cheesecloth that comes in little sheets. You kind of want to ball it up to about the size of your fist, where you have kind of one flat side with the rest kind of crumpled up behind it. You need some scrap pieces of newsprint that will be pre-cut, and one of these plastic cards. This is what like your student IDs are printed on, just extras, okay? So I'm gonna start off by putting on my gloves. Like I said, this gets kind of messy. Gloves are in the back hallway. There's a drawer labeled gloves, or they may be on the counter. I'm gonna take out some carbon black. Make sure it's mixed up really good. Make sure it hasn't separated or anything like that. This one looks good. I'm only gonna take out a little bit. Remember, we can always take out more, but once it's out of the can, we can't ever add it back in. So I'm gonna start off with a little bit. And the first thing you're gonna do, here's my matrix, it's been etched, is take this plastic card and scoop some ink on the end. And I like to kind of hold this on the edges. And you're literally covering the entire surface with ink. Even if there's nothing etched, like there's nothing etched in this outside space, you want to put ink there because it's gonna have what's called a plate tone. So it is gonna be the lightest part of the print, but it's not ever gonna be bright white. And you want it to be consistent. So you do wanna cover the whole thing. And where there is etching, I'm really gonna make sure I'm pushing down with this card. And what you're doing is forcing this ink into your etching. So into those little scratches that you did earlier. Once the entire surface has been covered, I'm gonna use this card and just take off as much excess as I can. And I just like to scoop it back here for the next print. And you're not gonna get it super clean, and that's okay. So just take off if there's any gobs of ink that you're able to. And we'll call that good. This is messy, like I said, but the cleaner you can keep the back of your matrix, the easier time you're gonna have. Now I'm gonna move to my tarlatan, this cheesecloth. So I'm gonna ball it up, like I said, one flat side. And now I'm gonna start to remove ink. So I'm just going in circles on the surface of my matrix. I'm not pushing down super hard. If you put too much force and push down, you're actually gonna take ink out of your etching and you'll have a salty print. So I usually say it's like the weight of my hand. I may focus a little bit extra on empty spaces. Make sure I'm taking off any gobs of ink. We do want it to be a clean print, so there shouldn't be excess. Like up here in this corner, you can see there's a bunch of ink still. Make sure you're taking that off with the tarlatan. This can be tricky because it's see-through, so sometimes if you get ink on the back, it's hard to know which side you need to spend more time on. I'm also gonna hit the edges really good, right here. I'm gonna hit it one more time. So you can see it left ink in my etching. And it's actually okay if this tarlatan has ink on it. It works just fine even when the entire thing has been covered with ink. After I've done it on my tarlatan, I'm gonna take a piece of newsprint. I'm gonna lay it flat down and use my hand and do what's called polishing the plate. So this is also taking off ink, but just a tiny amount. So this is kind of like your refinement step. You wouldn't want to take off a ton of ink with newsprint because it's not very effective at removing ink. But it does take off just kind of the little bits you have left. And I'm gonna focus where I've etched to and make sure it's nice and clean around there. You may need 2 pieces. And again, I'm not pushing super hard because I don't want a salty print. Focus on the corners, make sure it's nice and clean. And that should be good. Once I've made it to this stage, I'm ready to take it over to the press to print it. All right, once your matrix is inked, you're gonna bring it back to the press to print on. This ink residue is actually on the back, so I'm not too worried about that. You would want to make sure you have clean hands at this point, or grab someone that does have clean hands so you don't get smudges on your print. With Intaglio, you do need to soak your paper. So this is like a nice cotton rag paper. It's a thicker paper. And, ooh, I might have soaked it a little too long. What soaking does is it kind of loosens the fibers and allows us to really push that paper down into the etching. So you're just gonna let it drip off into the water, dry it off with this towel, and then you are ready to use it for your print. For Intaglio, you want a high amount of pressure to really push the paper into your etching and pull that ink out. So we always will use the press for this process. It does have some what's called felt blankets on it, and that just helps us push the paper down into the etching even more. So you're gonna start off by putting your matrix down first. The hilarious thing that I realized on my way back here was that I forgot to flip the D properly. So it has a mistake on it, but oh well. So your matrix goes down first. Make sure the etching is pointing up. Paper goes on next. And then the felt blankets go on very last. This is set at a super, super high pressure, so it's gonna feel tight rolling it through. You're gonna roll it underneath the barrel here. It may even need to be tighter, we'll see. Flip the blankets off. And you have an image. Backwards D emo. It works though. Notice that my empty space doesn't have any ink smudges or blots on it. The darks are plenty dark. If it was salty, you would see ink that has been lifted out too much of that. And your goal is to do this consistently. So now I would repeat the process until I have as many as I want that all match in my edition.